It was a quiet night. The air was cold, and the streets were empty. Tom, a young man with a curious mind, was walking home alone. He had stayed late at work and decided to take a shortcut through the old part of town. This area was known to be strange, a place people whispered about but never fully explained. As he walked, he felt something unusual. It was a sound, a faint, whispering sound. Then, Tom stopped and looked around. The whispering seemed to be coming from a dark path nearby, a path he had never noticed before. It was overgrown, with branches twisting and turning like they wanted to keep people out. Then, the whispers grew louder, and it was enough to make Tom's heart race. And then, he took a step closer and tried to listen. The voice was soft, like a distant echo, but he couldn't make out any words. His mind filled with questions. Who was whispering? Was it real, or just his imagination? Despite feeling a chill, Tom felt a pull toward the path. It was strange, like an invisible hand guiding him. He took a few more steps. As his curiosity was growing, the path led to a small, rusty gate covered in vines. Beyond it, he could see an old cemetery that was hidden and forgotten. Tom's curiosity overcame his fear. He reached out and pushed open the gate. It creaked, loud and eerie, breaking the quiet night. He stepped inside and felt the weight of the air change. It was colder here, and the shadows seemed thicker. Every step he took felt heavier, as if something was watching him. Then, he heard it again, the whispers. But this time, they sounded different, almost like someone was calling his name. Tom, Tom. His heart was pounded. Who could know his name here? Suddenly, he saw movement out of the corner of his eye. A shadow slipped behind a gravestone. Quick and silent, Tom's breath caught. Was he alone? He couldn't be sure because the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Tom knew he should turn back. His mind screamed at him to leave, but his feet wouldn't move. Then, the whispers grew louder, and it was calling him deeper into the cemetery. He felt trapped, like something wanted him here, something that wouldn't let him leave so easily. In that moment, Tom knew he had crossed a line. This was not an ordinary cemetery. It held secrets, secrets that were dark and ancient, and now he was part of those secrets. But he didn't turn back. Instead, he moved forward and stepped further into the unknown. But his heart was racing as the whispers filled his mind. Tom walked slowly as the whispers guided him deeper into the cemetery. Shadows danced around him, and it was making it hard to see. He felt the air grow colder, as if the night itself was watching him. Then he saw someone standing by an old, cracked tombstone. It was an elderly man, thin and frail, with a long coat and a wrinkled face. His eyes were sharp, like he could see straight into Tom's soul. "Turn back," the man said in a low, rough voice. "This is no place for the living." Tom felt a chill run down his spine, but he was curious. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am the gatekeeper," the old man replied. "I watch over this place. I keep the secrets safe." Tom looked around, feeling more uneasy. What secrets? The gatekeeper's face turned dark. "The graves here are not empty, and they hold more than bones. They hold souls, trapped and bound to this place." Tom shivered, but he couldn't turn back now. "Why are they trapped?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The gatekeeper looked at him with a sad, tired expression. "Some souls don't rest easy. Some have unfinished business, and some were bound here by a curse." Tom's heart raced. He wanted to leave, but his curiosity was too strong. "What kind of curse?" The gatekeeper didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked away, as if remembering something painful. "A curse that binds souls forever," he said finally. "A curse that doesn't let them leave." Tom took a step back and felt the weight of the gatekeeper's words. He could feel the eyes of the cemetery on him. Watching and waiting, the air felt thick, like he was walking through water. "Go home," The gatekeeper said softly, "Forget what you heard. Forget this place." But Tom couldn't forget. He was drawn to the mystery and to the darkness of the cemetery. He felt like he had a purpose here, something he needed to uncover. Without another word, the gatekeeper turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Tom alone. Then, the whispers returned, louder now, and they were echoing through the night. Tom knew he should leave, but he couldn't, not yet. Something was keeping him here, something he couldn't explain. And so, he moved deeper into the cemetery. His heart was pounding as the whispers grew louder, and the shadows closed in around him. As Tom wandered deeper into the cemetery, he felt the whispers take on a new tone. They sounded clearer, almost welcoming. It was strange, as if the voices were no longer warning him to leave, but inviting him to stay. The path grew narrower, twisting between gravestones and tall, silent trees. Tom's steps echoed softly. The crunch of gravel under his feet was mixing with the eerie whispers. He saw old headstones with names he didn't recognize, some with dates from hundreds of years ago. Then, a thick mist began to rise, weaving through the graves like ghostly fingers. Then, in the middle of the mist, he saw something. It was a letter, resting on a grave, folded neatly, as if waiting just for him, against his better judgment. Tom bent down and picked it up. The paper felt cold, and the writing was faint but readable. "Welcome, Tom. We have been waiting for you." Suddenly, Tom's heart skipped a beat. How did they know his name? He looked around and expected to see someone nearby, but there was no one, only shadows and silence. Then, he saw the words on the paper seem to move, shifting and swirling as if they were alive. A chill crept over him. Who had written this? And why was he here? The cemetery felt like it was closing in. Every shadow was watching him, and every tree was whispering his name. Tom folded the letter and placed it in his pocket. He knew he should turn back, but he couldn't resist the pull of the mystery. He continued forward, deeper into the heart of the cemetery. Then, he felt the letter in his pocket, growing colder with each step, as if it was a link to something darker, and something was waiting just ahead. Then he saw it, a large, crumbling mausoleum, half hidden by thick vines and shadows. The whispers grew louder as he approached it, forming words he could almost understand. It was as if the cemetery itself was inviting him into the mausoleum, urging him to discover the secrets it held. And then he took a deep breath, reached for the iron door, and pushed it open. Inside the mausoleum, the air was damp and heavy. Shadows danced along the walls and twisted into strange shapes. That made Tom feel like he was being watched. The place smelled of earth and something else, something old and decayed. The walls were covered in strange symbols and faded paintings of hooded figures. Then he saw their faces were hidden. Suddenly, Tom felt uneasy, but he couldn't look away. He reached out and traced one of the symbols with his finger. The stone was cold and rough, but something about it felt alive. Suddenly, he heard a soft thud behind him. Then, Tom whipped around, as his heart raced, but there was no one there, only the flickering shadows. But he could feel a presence, something just out of sight, something waiting in the dark. Then, from a corner of the room, a shadow moved. It was darker than the others, taking shape, almost human. It was tall, with long, thin arms and hollow eyes that seemed to stare into Tom's soul. Who are you?" Tom whispered, and his voice was trembling. The shadow didn't answer, but it moved closer, and each step was echoing in the silent mausoleum. Tom backed away, and his heart was pounding. He felt trapped, like he was caught in a web, with no way out. Then the shadow spoke. Its voice was soft but chilling. "You don't belong here, but here you are, seeking answers, but finding only fear." Tom swallowed, his throat dry. I just wanted to know what is going on here." The shadow seemed to smile, though it had no mouth. "Some questions are better left unanswered, Tom. Once you start digging, you may not like what you find." Tom took a shaky step back, but the shadow only grew closer. It whispered his name, filling his mind with strange images. Old graves, broken tombstones, faces twisted in pain. "Leave now," the shadow hissed, "or stay and become part of our story." Tom shivered, but his feet wouldn't move. He felt trapped, held by something stronger than fear. The shadow watched him and waited, as if he was too curious to turn away. Finally, the shadow drifted back into the darkness, leaving Tom alone, but he knew it wasn't gone. Only watching, waiting for him to make his choice. Tom took a deep breath and knew he had crossed into something dark and dangerous, but he couldn't turn back now. After leaving the mausoleum, Tom's mind was filled with questions. Who were the people in the paintings? Why was he feeling so drawn to this place? A place he knew he didn't belong. Then, he walked around the graves, feeling like each one had a story to tell. He noticed names carved into the stones, some worn away by time, others clear and sharp. He could almost feel their stories, like they were waiting for someone to listen. As he read each name, he began to see faint visions, flashes of the past. He saw people from different times, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, walking through the cemetery. Some looked sad, others angry, and a few looked terrified. Then he heard it again, a whisper, soft and gentle. It was different from the others, almost like a lullaby. Then he followed the sound and felt. It guides him to a small and hidden grave at the edge of the cemetery. The grave was simple, just a stone with a name, Evelyn. As he stared at the name, he felt a wave of sadness wash over him. He didn't know why, but he felt like Evelyn was important, like her story was a key to the mystery of the cemetery. He closed his eyes and listened to the whispers. They grew clearer, forming words, telling him a story. He saw Evelyn, a young woman with dark hair and sad eyes, walking through the cemetery, searching for something she had lost. The images grew stronger, and they were filling his mind. Evelyn had been bound to this place, cursed to wander forever, and her soul was unable to rest. She had loved someone. She had lost someone, and in her grief, she had become part of the cemetery. Tom opened his eyes and felt the weight of Evelyn's story. He felt a strange connection to her, as if her sadness was now part of him. He knew he had to find a way to help her, to break the curse that held her here. But he didn't know how. All he knew was that the cemetery was full of secrets, and he was just beginning to uncover them. The whispers became louder. After Tom discovered Evelyn's grave, almost like they were urging him forward, pushing him to uncover more, he felt her story hanging in the air, unfinished and waiting to be told. This feeling was strange and intense, and he felt a mix of sadness and fear, and it wrapped around him like a shadow. Tom stepped back and took a shaky breath. "Who are you, Evelyn?" he murmured, feeling the cold wind answer him with a soft sigh. Then, as if drawn by some invisible thread, he found himself walking toward a cluster of older graves, and the mist was swirling around him. Each step seemed to pull him deeper, into a part of the cemetery he hadn't noticed before. Here, the trees grew thicker, and their twisted branches were blocking out the moonlight, casting long shadows across the path. At the center of this forgotten corner, Tom saw an ancient statue, a stone angel with one wing broken, and its face was hidden by moss and ivy. In its hand was an old scroll, and though worn by time, Tom could make out a faint inscription etched into the stone. "Bound by loss, held by grief, a curse unbroken, a soul without peace." Tom traced the words with his finger, and felt a strange warmth from the stone. The moment he touched it, his vision became blurred, and he saw flashes of Evelyn's life, her love, her sorrow, and the night she had been bound to the cemetery. She had been young, innocent, and full of hope. But her love had been lost to a tragedy in this very place. Then, the vision ended as suddenly as it began, and Tom was left standing there, breathless. He understood now that Evelyn was a restless soul, and she was trapped by a curse of her own making. Her grief was so strong, so consuming, that it had woven her spirit into the very ground of the cemetery, binding her to it. But he also sensed something more. There was an ancient presence in the cemetery, something dark and watchful, that had claimed Evelyn and held her there, feeding off her sorrow. Suddenly he knew it was this presence that he had to face, the force that had turned her love into an eternal nightmare. Tom took a step back and felt a chill down his spine. Breaking the curse would mean confronting this dark power, something that was older than the cemetery itself. He was just a stranger, but he felt a pull, a need to set things right. "Don't worry, Evelyn," he whispered, and his voice was steady. "I will find a way to help you." But as he turned to leave, he heard a soft laugh echo through the trees, a laugh that wasn't Evelyn's. The dark presence was aware of him now, and it had no intention of letting him go. The next morning, Tom woke up and felt exhausted, as though he hadn't slept at all. The memories of the cemetery felt like a dream, but he could still feel the weight of the curse, and the dark presence watching him. He tried to push it from his mind, but something told him that ignoring it would only make things worse. Throughout the day, strange things began happening around him. The lights in his apartment flickered, and he heard faint whispers whenever he was alone. He could feel the cemetery's hold on him, and followed him even in daylight. He tried calling his friends, hoping they could distract him, but every time he dialed, his phone would lose signal. Later that evening, he decided to research the cemetery's history. He went to the local library, hoping to find some answers about Evelyn and the curse that held her there. The librarian, an older woman with sharp eyes, seemed hesitant when Tom mentioned the cemetery. She leaned in close, and her expression was serious. "You have been there, haven't you?" Tam nodded. I think there is a spirit named Evelyn. She's trapped there, and something dark is holding her." Then, the librarian's face turned pale. "Evelyn isn't the only one trapped. There are others, many others. That cemetery has a history of strange deaths, accidents, and disappearances." She handed him an old newspaper, dated over a century ago. The headline read, "Mysterious Disappearances Linked to Cemetery." The article detailed a series of unexplained vanishings, each one involving someone who had entered the cemetery at night and was never seen again. "People have tried to break the curse before," the librarian whispered, "but the cemetery, it doesn't let them go, whatever's in there. It feeds off the living, it lures them in, one by one." Tom's hands trembled as he read, but he couldn't look away. He felt a growing dread, but also a strange determination. He knew now that this curse went beyond Evelyn. It was ancient and evil, and it was up to him to try and break it. "Be careful, Tom," the librarian warned. Her eyes were dark with fear. "Once it has your attention, it won't let you go." Tom thanked her and left, but her words echoed in his mind. The cemetery was calling him back, and he knew that he would have to return, this time prepared for the dangers that awaited him. That night, Tom stood at the edge of the cemetery, and his heart was racing. The fog was thicker than before, swirling around the entrance like ghostly tendrils, almost as if the cemetery was welcoming him back. He took a deep breath and stepped into the shadows. The air felt colder, and the whispers grew louder, filling his mind with strange thoughts. He could feel the dark presence watching him, but he ignored it and focused on finding Evelyn's grave. As he walked, the ground seemed to shift beneath his feet, and it led him deeper into the cemetery, past graves he didn't remember seeing before. Each step felt heavier, as if the ground itself was trying to hold him back. Finally, he reached Evelyn's grave. The air around it was thick with sorrow, and he could feel her spirit close, watching him, waiting. "I am here, Evelyn," he whispered, and knelt beside her grave. "I know you are trapped, and I want to help you, but I need to understand. What happened to you?" Then the mist parted, and for a brief moment, he saw Evelyn. She was young, with dark, haunted eyes. Her face was pale and sad. She reached out to him, and her voice was barely a whisper. "I loved, I lost, and now I am lost forever." The sadness in her voice was overwhelming, and Tom felt a tear slide down his cheek. He could sense her pain, and her longing to be free, but he also felt the darkness, lurking just beyond, watching and waiting. He knew that to free Evelyn, he would have to face it, to confront the force that held her here. He didn't know if he was strong enough, but he couldn't turn back now. With a deep breath, he whispered, "I will break this curse, Evelyn. I will set you free." And then, from the shadows, he heard that same chilling laugh. The dark presence had heard his promise, and it was ready for him. The atmosphere grew colder, as the laughter faded, leaving only silence. Tom felt his pulse quicken, and every shadow around him was deepening, as though they were alive. He sensed something coming closer, unseen but undeniably real. A cold wind swept through the cemetery, sending chills down his spine. Tom gripped the edge of Evelyn's tombstone and felt the weight of her spirit beside him. Then he saw it, a shape, a figure moving through the fog, slow and deliberate. It was tall and cloaked in shadows. Its face was hidden beneath a dark hood. As it moved, the air thickened, and Tom felt an overwhelming sense of dread. "You think you can break the curse?" The figure spoke, its voice a whisper, but somehow thundering in his ears. Tom swallowed hard and gathered his courage. "I am not leaving until I free Evelyn." The figure chuckled, a low, mocking sound. "She's part of this place now, bound by her own sorrow. You cannot save her, just as you cannot save yourself." Tom took a step back, but the figure only moved closer, extending a thin, bony hand. "Stay, Tom. You belong here now. You. Like all the others who came before." Tom's fear grew, but he couldn't turn away. He had to face it, and he had to find a way to defeat this darkness. But how could he fight something that was everywhere? Something that had claimed so many before him? He stood his ground and refused to back down. Even as the figure loomed closer, its hollow eyes were locking onto his. Tom knew he was risking everything, but he also knew that, if he didn't try, the curse would claim him too. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the figure faded into the mist, leaving only the echo of its laughter. Tom was left alone, but he knew that his fight had only just begun. The chill of the encounter still clung to Tom. As he stood alone in the cemetery, his breath was coming in shallow, uneven gasps. The figure's taunting words rang in his ears. "You belong here now." He could feel the cemetery's dark power, tightening its grip on him, but he knew he couldn't give up. Determined, he thought back to what he had read about ancient curses, and spirits bound to specific places. Many tales spoke of rituals that could break curses and free lost souls. Tom realized that, if he wanted to save Evelyn, he would need to perform one of these rituals. Tom returned to the library the next morning. His face was pale and his eyes were haunted. The librarian, Mrs. Porter, noticed him immediately. Her expression softened, and she led him into the archives without a word. She seemed to understand what he needed and handed him an old, dusty book titled Secrets of the Forgotten Dead. Flipping through the yellowed pages, Tom came across a section about rituals of release. It described ancient rites meant to sever the ties between a cursed spirit and the place it was bound. The instructions were clear, But they came with a warning. If the ritual was performed incorrectly, it would anger the spirits and curse the person attempting it. "This is dangerous, Tom," Mrs. Porter whispered, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "Once you start, there is no turning back." Tom nodded. "I have to do this. I can't leave her trapped there." The ritual required specific items: a lock of hair from the spirit's resting place, soil from her grave, and a lit candle that would burn through the night. But the most important ingredient was courage, because he would have to face Evelyn's sorrow head-on, feel her pain, and endure it without breaking. Armed with the book, Tom returned to the cemetery that night. He carried a small candle, a jar for the soil, and a bundle of herbs he had read were needed to calm restless spirits. The air was thick with fog, and he could feel the dark presence hovering, watching him with interest, almost as if it were amused by his determination. Kneeling by Evelyn's grave, Tom lit the candle and began to chant the ancient words. His voice trembled at first, but he grew stronger with each verse, letting the words fill him and connect him with Evelyn's spirit. He could feel her sorrow rising around him, wrapping him in an unbearable sadness that threatened to pull him under. He clenched his fists and forced himself to endure. "Evelyn," he called softly, his voice barely a whisper, "I am here to free you. I won't let them keep you here any longer." As he finished the final line of the chant, the ground beneath him trembled, and a cold wind whipped through the cemetery and extinguished his candle. At that moment, Tom felt Evelyn's spirit brush against him, a faint, fleeting touch that filled him with both sadness and gratitude. But before he could rejoice, he sensed the dark presence closing in. Angry and relentless, the ritual was working, but the cemetery's curse wasn't ready to let Evelyn go. Without a fight, a surge of cold air rushed through the cemetery, carrying with it a wave of whispers. Angry, haunting, accusing, Tom could feel the power of the curse fighting back, stronger and more menacing than before. It was as if the cemetery itself was coming alive, furious that he was trying to break its hold. The ground beneath him shifted, and he stumbled, nearly falling, as the soil seemed to ripple like water. The graves around him appeared to pulse, as if the spirits within them were awakening, disturbed by his actions. Then he heard faint cries, hollow and full of rage, filling the air and echoing through the darkness. Tom's heart raced as he clutched his candle and tried to reignite it, but the cold wind snuffed it out. Before it could catch, panic crept into his mind, but he forced himself to focus, to keep his thoughts on Evelyn and his promise to set her free. Then, out of the mist, he saw the shadowy figure again. It stood just a few feet away, and its face was hidden, but its presence was oppressive and terrifying. This time, Tom could sense its power, an ancient, dark energy that radiated hatred and malice. "You dare defy me?" the figure hissed, its voice a harsh whisper that cut through the air. Tom swallowed hard and struggled to keep his voice steady. "I am here to help Evelyn. She doesn't deserve to be trapped here." The figure laughed, a cold, hollow sound that sent chills down his spine. "Evelyn is mine. Her sorrow feeds me and binds me. She's part of this place, as you soon will be." A wave of despair washed over Tom, almost overwhelming him. The curse was trying to break him, to make him give up, but he clenched his fists, grounding himself in his determination. "No," he said firmly, and his voice was steadying. "Evelyn deserves peace. You have no right to keep her here." The figure's form shifted, growing taller, its face twisting into something monstrous. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and it extended a clawed hand toward Tom. The air grew colder and the shadows deeper, as if the entire cemetery was closing in on him. But just as the figure reached for him, a soft, familiar voice broke through the darkness. "Tom, don't give up." It was Evelyn's voice, faint but unmistakable, and it filled him with renewed strength. He took a deep breath, steeling himself as he faced the dark figure. "I won't let you win," he said. His voice was steady and defiant. "I promised Evelyn I would set her free. And I will." The figure let out an enraged scream, and the air around Tom exploded with icy wind. But he held his ground and refused to give in to the fear, determined to see the ritual through. The dark presence seemed to retreat. Though Tom knew it was only a momentary pause, he felt Evelyn's spirit growing stronger, her presence warmer and more tangible. She was close now, and he could sense her gratitude, her hope. "Evelyn," he whispered. His heart was aching. "Tell me how to help you." He felt her spirit shift beside him, and her voice was soft but clear. "I need to remember the love I lost, and to let go of the sorrow." Tom understood now. Evelyn was bound to the cemetery by her grief, her memories of love and loss so painful that they had created a chain and trapped her spirit in the place where her sorrow was strongest. Taking a deep breath, Tom began speaking softly, guiding her through her memories and helping her confront the pain. He spoke of love, of forgiveness, of finding peace. He could feel her spirit clinging to his words, and each one was lifting a weight from her heart. "Let go, Evelyn," he whispered gently. "Your love doesn't have to keep you here. You can carry it with you, beyond this place." A soft light began to glow around Evelyn's grave, a gentle, warm light that pushed back the shadows. Driving away the cold, Tom could feel her spirit growing lighter, and her sorrow was lifting as she finally began to let go. But as her spirit grew stronger, so did the dark presence, fighting to keep its hold on her. The figure appeared again. Its form was twisted with rage, and its eyes were blazing with hatred. "She belongs to me," it roared, reaching for her. Then, Tam stepped in front of Evelyn's grave, and he was shielding her spirit with his own. "No, she's free now. You can't keep her anymore." The figure lunged at him, its shadowy form engulfing him. But Tom held his ground and focused on Evelyn's light, on her freedom. The darkness pressed against him, and it was cold and suffocating. But he refused to let go, anchoring Evelyn's spirit with his own strength. Then, with a final surge of light, Evelyn's spirit broke free, and her sorrow was melting away as she rose above the cemetery, a radiant, peaceful figure. She looked down at Tom, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft and full of peace. And then, in a burst of light, she was gone. The dark presence let out a furious scream. As it faded, weakened by Evelyn's freedom, the cemetery grew quiet and the shadows were retreating as the curse began to unravel. Tom stumbled back, and he was exhausted but victorious. He had done it. Evelyn was free, and the curse was broken. But he couldn't shake the feeling that, even though he had won, the cemetery would remember him, and that he would always carry a piece of its darkness with him. Tom stood in the cemetery. His heart was still pounding, and the silence was settling heavy around him. The once suffocating darkness seemed to lift, leaving the air feeling strangely peaceful. Evelyn's spirit was free, but Tom felt a strange emptiness. Without her presence beside him, it was as if a part of him had been lifted into the light along with her. As he turned to leave, he noticed something lying in the grass by Evelyn's grave. It was a small locket, tarnished with age, but unmistakably beautiful. He picked it up carefully, recognizing it as the same locket he had seen in his visions, the one Evelyn held so tightly in her memories. Opening it, and he saw a faded photograph of a young couple, Evelyn and the man with kind eyes, smiling beside her. The man's name was engraved on the inside, Joseph. Tom's heart ached as he held the locket and felt the weight of her story in his hand. He knew this was her final gift to him, a memory of the love she had once held, a reminder of the peace she had finally found. But then, a whisper drifted through the air, soft and familiar. "Thank you, Tom. You have given me peace." A chill ran through him as he looked around, half expecting to see Evelyn's spirit once more. But she was gone, and she was truly at rest now. Tom held the locket tightly and felt both sorrow and gratitude for the connection they had shared. As he walked away from the cemetery, he noticed that the shadows seemed to follow him, lingering at the edge of his vision. Though he had broken the curse, he knew he would never forget the darkness he had faced, or the strength he had found within himself. Back home, Tom tried to return to his normal life, but he couldn't shake the lingering sense of unease. Every night, as he drifted off to sleep, he felt as if he could hear faint whispers, memories of the cemetery creeping into his dreams. He saw glimpses of Evelyn's sorrow, the dark figure's menacing eyes, and the twisted shadows that had once tried to claim him. One night, he awoke with a start unfelt, a cold hand brush against his shoulder. His heart was racing, and he looked around his room, half expecting to see the shadowy figure looming over him. But there was nothing there, only the dark, empty silence. Despite his relief, Tom felt a nagging suspicion that he wasn't entirely free of the cemetery's curse. Perhaps he had carried a piece of it with him, a mark left by the dark presence that would never fully fade. As the days passed, he tried to push away the memories and focused on his friends, his work, and anything that would distract him from the haunting echoes of the past. But deep down, he knew that the darkness would always be a part of him, a reminder of the night he had ventured into the unknown, risking his life to free a spirit bound by sorrow. Months later, Tom found himself drawn back to the cemetery. The thought of returning filled him with dread, but he couldn't ignore the feeling tugging at him, urging him to visit Evelyn's grave one last time. He needed closure, a final moment to say goodbye to the darkness and the spirits he had encountered. The cemetery looked different in the daylight, its shadows less menacing, its silence less oppressive. But as he approached Evelyn's grave, he felt a familiar chill, a reminder of the journey they had shared. He placed the locket on her grave, a symbol of the love she had lost, and finally found again in peace. "Goodbye, Evelyn," he whispered, his voice soft and filled with gratitude. "Thank you for teaching me about courage and love." As he turned to leave, he felt a warmth surrounding him, a gentle presence that filled him with peace. It was as if Evelyn's spirit was there, watching over him, offering her final blessing. Walking away from the cemetery, Tom felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The whispers had faded, the shadows no longer lurked in his dreams. He knew he was free from the curse, from the darkness, and from the sorrow that had haunted Evelyn's soul. With each step, Tom felt himself returning to his life, stronger and more resilient, forever changed by the journey he had undertaken. He carried the memory of Evelyn with him, a quiet reminder of the light that could be found, even in the darkest of places. And as he left the cemetery behind, he knew he would never forget the courage it took to face the unknown, to risk everything for someone he had never met. It was a journey that had tested his strength, his resolve, and his spirit, leaving him forever bound to the haunting mystery of the cemetery. A mystery that, in the end, had led him to find peace within himself. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Please share this video with your friends and family too. Thanks,